Delighted to introduce our poet tonight. I've been looking forward to Lex's reading. This is the second reading that Lex has done. He was here several years ago in the Milwaukie Poetry Series. He was born and raised in Portland. He's published 4 college textbooks, 2 literary anthologies, and 5 collections of poems, including The Admirations, which won the Oregon Book Award, and his recent collection, a new collection, 1 Hour This Morning and Other Poems. His work has appeared widely in various magazines. He has also been honored with the Kenneth Houston Award and the Silcox Prize. He studied with Madeline DeFries and Richard Hugo at the University of Montana, and he has an MFA from there in 1977. And with Dave Smith at the University of Utah, which is where he had his PhD. That was 1981. For 10 years, he and Debbie, his lovely wife Debbie, who is here. Can we say hello to Debbie? He and Debbie ran a small press, Arrowwood Books. After 11 years at Oregon State, Lex moved in 1992 to Linfield College, where his teaching has twice received the Edith Green Distinguished Professor Award. Now grandparents, he and his wife, Deborah Barry Runciman, have been married more than 40 years. Congratulations. Would you join me in welcoming our poet tonight, Lex Runciman? Lex, come on, man.
Debbie was 8 and I was 9 when we got married. So. Pacific or not, the skies of my heart are colored by the sea. Color of doves, they bunch like fleece. They call to their upper reaches muslin and linen. They rain. Blackened, they go some mornings all the hues to blue. The landscape of my heart breathes trees, and under them mosses, creeks, trillium. Basalt uplifts and snow make a year of advances and of retreats. Thus the waters of the landscape of my heart ice the hands that cup them, and for the love of trout feed caddis and mayflies, and offer for maniacal salmon gravel, cascades, and pools. Leaves drift, wet pebbles shine, breeze through shade is balm. The air of my heart is fog, is dew and clear, wood smoke, salt and wet. Its notes fill my ears. It colors fire, blooms roses and apples, and warms the slumped naps of summer afternoons. Muddy roiling, a river arriving, a river going away, bridges make the cities of my heart. Walking over, we pause, some of us. We lean on our arms and look. As for the people of my heart, of only a few do I know their names, and they know who they are. So, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Tom. And thank you all those who helped determine the slate of writers for this series. It's a distinguished series. I'm very pleased and privileged to be asked back. Thanks to the city of Milwaukie for your support of cultural events, and not just this one, but any number of others over the year. Thanks in particular to the Ledding Library, and as well thanks to all libraries and librarians. As someone who grew up in a house with few books, I don't know who I'd be if it weren't for libraries. Though I began with a poem from starting from anywhere, for the rest of the evening, I'm going to be reading from this book, the new one, 1 Hour That Morning, which came out last year from Salmon Poetry. The book's title comes from a sequence that's in 7 parts, 1 Hour That Morning. It's a sequence of poems in 7 parts. Each of these parts takes its focus from some action that, at least as I see it, occurs 1 hour that morning. So the plan is to read the first 2 parts in succession, then to slot in some others along the way, returning at intervals to the title sequence. I'll let you know when we come close to the end. In the meantime, it's fine, wonderful even, if you listen attentively. Don't be worried or surprised if you don't follow everything, though I take some trouble with how they sound. Mostly these poems are written for the page first. This isn't going to be a slam poetry event. They were written to be read and reread, and I hope they justify that kind of attention. If some of what you hear encourages you into your own thoughts, that's fine too. There will be enough in the way of stops and starts that you can come back and connect again, and there's no test. Okay. So, here's the first 2 parts of 1 hour that morning. 1, Saturday. Light squares the windows. The lover you slept with sleeps on as you get up and peer out. Rain done. A tide-swept beach. Whatever the day will bring must be over the horizon even now. And there's the novel you went to sleep reading, where for pages and pages it stays Saturday. Someone else standing like this at another window. In praise of George Reader. Wind blows a baby stroller right off the wharf and 3 feet down to water. A woman shouts as the stroller rolls and sinks. You do not empty your pockets or remove your shoes, only your coat. You jump in, do not notice the water's temperature, only that you cannot move as surely or quickly as you wish. If there is noise, you do not hear. The stroller floats with a current, does not entirely disappear. At last you grab a handle, kick and scull, pulling it, stroller and child, to where someone else has let down a rope, which you wrap and knot with fingers that have thickened. The stroller passes you as they haul it up, and the child buckled in looks slumped, asleep, soaked. You shiver now. You have climbed out and put on your coat as a woman you have never seen kneels, hair in her face, as she works and works, pressing that small chest until she stops, leans back a little. The child moving an arm, the child crying, water running down your face. The mother who has had to watch this, sobbing, covering her mouth. And even now a helicopter angles in against the wind, with the wind. The mother and child taken inside and lifted away. This is the purest thing you can remember doing, and anyone would have. This bright gift, a privilege you'd wish on no one. These next 2 have something to do with food. The first takes its title from something that Anita Bruckner said in an interview. And I'll get them, there it is. Fate is rarely kind, and nature never. Chipped beef and peas and floury gravy on toast. The peas float, green islands. So, Father will not be home for dinner. As the toast soaks, mother, brother, and brother say grace. In the garage, a howler beagle howls. If your father drank, drove home, took a long nap behind the wheel before he could rouse himself, you'd know in those days only your mother at breakfast saying, grapefruit, and quiet now. Your father was out late. The boy hated creamed corn. He couldn't eat it, and said so. His aunt insisted, lectured, scolded, angered. So he ate it, then threw it up on her table, on her linoleum-clean yellow floor. He could not remember ever feeling so quickly better. I told you, he said. She sent him to bed. He had not known it was a battle. A summer day, heat, a weight and salt, corrosive, leaky into the eyes, and three of you using only your hands and faces, burrow and juice and chomp a watermelon. Dropped from chest height, it broke, and yes, you lost some of it, but not much. As far as memory goes, I have known people starved for the lack of my every bite. For bitter mints, satsumas, raspberries dew wet and fruit sugar hand to mouth. Angel food. Kebabs from Halipi's grill. Wild salmon, could I but find it every other day. At the Three Corner Bakery. Composed with a Doric splendor of butter, flour, cream cheese, sugar, and eggs. 3 German tall cakes occupy a glass shelf. No slices, whole cakes only, please. Below them rests a lone chocolate bomb cake, half a sphere like a helmet, a dark shell of coconut, walnuts, cherries, almonds, dates. Blueberry shorts, sold out. Helped and served, I read word by word about where people die on average at 43, and for this latte I spent a week's wages. I don't understand money. It buys cakes, coffee, I get that. I love the sweet indulgence of excess. It must be justice I don't get, or appetite, what we have, all I want. One out of that morning, part 3. It's titled Suddenly. She says to herself as her knees loosen and her vision descends, I think I shall lie down in this place and look closely at blades of grass and how the ground contours, never flat. A bird opens its beak. The color there, have I seen that before? Sound gone. Then back again, but distant. Then close, and I know now I am watching a robin, its head tilted as it listens to the ground near its odd feet. I see trees, conifers, Douglas firs, none of these in Missouri, but cottonwoods. That dogwood in the Nelson's side yard, moles at its roots. I swam once in a lake, a naked lake. No, I swam in a lake once, no clothes. Kicked and dove and floated, and no one saw, and I never said. I don't want to regret any promise, or not going to Rome, or Geneva, or Boston, or any time I thought was wasted. Hawaiian air, warm. San Diego air, warm. Cake in the oven, stew on the stove, day on schedule, and vodka in a glass. I think now I am going to leave everything. What he did in the war. Years after it meant no service, he believed the spot on his right lung said tuberculosis cured itself. He never forgot the biopsy needle between his ribs and disappearing slowly. A deepening insistence only hands on his shoulders held him against. Then the coughing. Results never reported. So he figured chance sent him a message, trust what happens. And what happened was, women he met said, lucky to him. Lucky, damn you. A mouth briefly near his ear, hair at his cheek, hand on his back, music, her eyes closed, his shoulder and neck, props for a safe dream. He never fought, trained, or had to learn to come home, never killed anyone, never tasted that. No one accused him. They saw a life left behind, a ghost, a kind of miracle. Like a dream, when you see that house you lived in, porch the same, the screen door banging, someone you know calling out, 20 minutes. Their garden. Up the gravel path, past the trio of mugo pines and the deodar cedars girth, April into blousy May, we'd find apple blossoms. 3 branches grafted on one trunk, a circus tree, pink, lighter pink, darker. And under them the strawberries' white blooms become tight-lobed green fruits begun to swell. And after the blueberries, half to robins, half to people, fruits plumped wine purple into sweet, and after weeks of sprinklers at dusk, summer having faded towards late August and worst, and months past their delicate pollinations, the ripened arrivals of apples commenced. Greens tart for pies, then the rose red speckled and from a distance sweet, and last the red's aggressive shine on a shirt front, curved essence, crisp sugar, now and then wormy as sin, the dripping red delicious reds. It was summer's early mornings and twilight lingering, ease and ignorance and slow time, and early and late it was carrots, pulled muddy from clayey ground, tapered roots brightening under hose water, to become the sun's own color going down. I don't know what he sees. We'd driven hours to visit him, the old man abandoned, old man of anger and grief. He looked at my daughters, smiled a drunk grin. They saw a clown and wished to play. He did not understand why we would not stay. He cried that we did not understand. He wept and muttered, splashed vodka, followed us to the driveway, and as he waved, he fell. From the car, we all watched him, waving and falling. So now I am driving him to days and nights of no booze and no solitude. How many, I ask, how many this morning? 6, he says. He shifts in his seat. More than 6. He looks out the window. I don't know what he sees. This is from 1 hour that morning, part 4. Girl the wind took. Clouds darkened and the wind erased, then lightning. Boulders lifted, a roaring pulled out, trees screaming could not be heard. The wind that took her kept her. 2 days her mother never sat down. Her father dove and dove into the lake, afraid he heard her underwater calling. At dusk on the 3rd day, the girl the wind took returned. She had lost all clothing, yet was not cold. She had lost 2 fingernails and could not explain. 1 ear had died, but the other listened. Her parents clothed her, hugged her, and wept. The girl the wind took has returned, we said. We needed years to learn she understood. Wind had taken every doll, horse, kitten, and teacup. and everyone and everything else, and left her in no place she recognized, where no one tasted tin in the water, nor heard the sky, nor lived the terror of her belief. I do want to say at this point that I'm grateful that we do not live in a place where tornadoes are frequent. And about our most amazing spring, despite today's rain, the less said the better, lest it come back to haunt us. Okay, sort of switch of tone here for a minute. This is from 1 Hour That Morning, Part 5, Light and Place. It carries an epigraph, Edinburgh, 1904. He starts with blank paper 5 inches by 7, and brown, yellow, blue, ochre, bone black, and Chinese white pressed from tubes. He looks, considers dilutions, measures out water from glass that once held a dip pen's ink, chooses a squirrel hair brush, long poplar, slenderer than a pencil, no larger at its tip than a match head. Fast water's shadows trouble him. When a pony cart crosses or a person wanders over the bridge's arches, he pauses or concentrates elsewhere. On patchy grass, children chase dogs and picnickers loll, yet he paints a morning in yellow-blue wash. He wants this view his own. In less than the time between meals, he ends a Sunday's rare good weather with light and place, one fading, one he puts initials to, and so carries home. Now, that poem is actually based on a small painting that came over from Scotland on my father's side sometime in the 1900s. And it may sound like, if you were listening very carefully, that you might have heard the phrase light fading. It may sound like we're talking about that point in the day when day turns to night. But we need to remember that this is Scotland, and it's a rarity when morning sunshine continues past noon. I've got a couple more about painting. I confess to liking to look at portraits. There's no social taboo. You can just stare at them. You can't do this with people, but you can do it with portraits. You can just stare at them. And of course, a face in a portrait is typically an enigma, unless it's a person you know. And most of the time, in my experience, it's not. So really, if that's the case, all you know for sure is what you're seeing. That's it. The next one that I want to read is, I want to find the page first, is titled Trony, Flemish, about 1654, J. Paul Getty Museum. I'll say that again. Trony, Flemish, about 1654, J. Paul Getty Museum. That's literally the card that was next to this painting on the wall at the J. Paul Getty Museum. Trony, I've looked this up, I feel very proud of myself. Trony is a 17th century Dutch word for face, which is wonderful if you think about it. In this example, the painting's subject is the opposite of highborn. So it's likely this portrait was painted not on commission, but rather to serve as a kind of advertisement. See, this is what I can do, even with the most unlikely of subjects. So, Trony, Flemish. Trony, Flemish, about 1654, J. Paul Getty Museum. Green leather patched at a shoulder. It's not even her coat. She's that poor. Michael Swartz made her a present of it, and she'll need it for art's lie and truth now that she has agreed to sit, quote, at least 10 days, unquote, he has said. Sundays accepted, in a room unheated because Painting itself warms him. Below a cream-brown headscarf, a margin of brown hair, almost red. The left eye does not track with the right. A half smile slides over gums absent several teeth. Lower jaw abscessed on one side, a little puffy. Though curious, he allows her each day to look. She can't imagine why anyone goes to such trouble. She sits and he pays. Time blurs. At first, she heard every bell hour. Now she thinks about poultices, weather, the baby girl who grew and left, whom she nursed, her own, then with the mouths of others, for coins for a little while. Whatever became of those coins, whatever became of those mouths. She wonders what it would be to know your own mother, or choose to say, or not, your age. She wonders what it would be to write your name, to read. And this one is kind of the opposite. This hangs in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. It's called Portrait of a Man, 1520s, by Rosso Fiorentino, who is a Florentine, painting in the 1520s, clearly enough. The subject this time is highborn. He's young. He's dressed sort of like in the sort of crazy gowns I'll wear at Linfield's graduation, this sort of blousy black thing with the funny hat. Yeah, okay. Cap and gown severe black, bloused below the shoulders, and at his neck a width of white tatting, laced loose, tied as a shoe is tied. But whether he thinks as a scholar, whether he has lived discipline, as wild at the root unknowing and wish, and whether he has tasted intelligence, diligence, intuition, and play, he is not at play, but impatient, the weather hot, and he must stand in black, elbow out, right hand on his hip, a posture more confident than what his face says, which is that he has not yet known genuine disappointment or the limits of privilege, only, perhaps, a fondness for oranges, aversion to milk, and from any of several Florentine bridges at dusk, wonder at the flight of bats. I've got two here next that both take their titles from somebody else. And I've done that already a few times, and I did it a lot in the earlier book. I'm going to do it 2 more times here tonight. The first one is from a novel by Sarah Hall, In the East They Believe. It's just a phrase, and it just sort of jumps out sometimes. These phrases do this. And when it happens, and I'm reading the book, I put a little dot in the margin next to the book, next to that phrase. I can almost always find the dot and figure out the phrase that was of interest. And if I'm smart and I remember, I go back at the end after I finish the book and look for the dots. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I don't. In the East, they believe. In the East, they believe the soul travels at the speed of a camel. Mine rests under furs. It has quit trying to keep up. It watches a stream dictated by basalt, half hidden by green stems and yellow blossoms. It wanders Stonehenge, unable to understand, unwilling to leave. It seeks itself in water and a woman's eyes. At the solitude of my grandmother's tomb, my soul keeps watch. Under Brunelleschi's dome, it sits in an iron chair, gazes and looks down. At Crater Lake, blue over and below, it arcs out stones for what their circles do. And my soul yet cradles a newborn head and hums her sister to sleep, to sleep. I have escaped out of all my old tracks, Nathaniel Hawthorne, from a letter of his. I have escaped out of all my old tracks, walked Bellasquardo, the hill, Galileo, Milton, Montale, and Henry James knew. Climbed the Duomo to its inside rim, looked up at judgment, down on iron chairs, and from the cupola at last saw Firenze a circle of tiles and domes. In Fiesole, half blind under a new sun, I sat off Piazza Mino, high on a Roman curve. On stage, a teacher spoke Italian, her children fidgety as birds. Deceived and sure, I saw David's neck pulse and rest and pulse, and 4 times paid coins for 10 minutes light on Pontormo's deposition. Jesus, the blue of death, his mother's grief so human it's unreligious. At dawn on the Piazza d'Annunziata, even Loggia, where beggars sleep and the drunk shit, our sculptural, hushed, historied calm. In Santa Croce, I lit a candle, small light, spent faster than a dime, and sat anonymous, blind to immortals and the frescoes of heaven, unable to count all I loved. One hour that morning, part 6, what will not go away. Water endlessly over boulders. Snow, a blue-white falling and disappearing. Rain, crater and bounce. High current, that hard-shouldered hurry. Low September whisper and murmur under stars. What will not go away must be peach skin and how it peels. The free stone welcome a tongue relearns, ease of a blade's divisions, onion, tomato, cantaloupe rind, fruit and goop and seeds. And here are plates and bowls and the people who help themselves, all their voices say, and how their faces laugh. What will not go away may be trivial as the feel of a dish towel, a musical phrase, the look of the top of a head. A chestnut ages a smooth and remarkable brown, the color of winter ale. Some of what will not go away makes stuttering, anguished breath, a bitter, steeped tea. And some days from the cup of your scalded hands you must drink again what will not go away. Getting close there. Not quite there yet, but we're getting there. How can we live in this fear? That's a title from a poem by Denise Levertov. Clouds may drift from the west. They could fork lightning or rain to gentle the dust. Tires might hold air. Past fir and madrona, past fir and madrona and bleached grass, they might roll thousands of miles. Goats might climb up the slender trunks of saplings until they eat standing up like people. Poised in their shoulders, turkey vultures might circle and angle an hour before they perch on the downed oak and fold in their great black cloaks. The building's 38 floors might sway only a little as hail like thrown peas rattles windows and the elevators rise. Butter might rest in its own dish, fish gape in the tank, And the phone, when it rings, could be someone loved. A woodland. Skins of maples exhale in rainy months epiphytes and aura and soft neon. Jubilant, distraught, or patient fir trunks stand as rooted. No feeling moves them, though wind must. Snapped ends hung in saplings like scarves. A woodland slipped by water offers land's contours, sides bridged that never touch. Is that a branch or a yellow-headed bird? Snow falling windless at freezing makes a woodland's every horizontal white. Calligraphy of willows, cedars slumped, each thorn-furred arc its twinned serrate points. A wood with snow falling goes quiet, and near you hear your breath and the impacts of flakes. In leafless February thaw, watery sun, you might sit in such a woodland, all thickness rising to thin, singulars to ever more plurals, so suggesting imagination's ambition that from the time you lose track of, you can make an afternoon. One hour that morning, 7, last one on this sequence, and then I've got a couple more and we're done. This is titled To Us. 1 hour that morning, as night turned black to gray, 7 children dead in a fire became perceptible to sight as wind in trees is to ears. And an old man's exultation rode on a flicker's white, and a woman dead of cancer sang in the wings of a crow. From half blossoms of mountain ash and cherry, from chrome glints, bricks and house numbers, dead voices rose familiar, so many of them happy. Even the stunned and unwilling rustled and sighed, eased by the weight of emotion and meaning shrugged off, left behind in common to us. Live long enough. This is in 2 parts, and the second part is the broadside you've got. And then one more after this. Live long enough. Part 1, what you want to say. You want to say you or we on this day of speckled March rain, snowdrop in primrose drooping in a cold damp. What you want to say goes dilatory, shy, unwanted, stubborn, inescapable. Leukemia, dementia, aortic dissection, or a car you don't see, organism or fate, feather or lead, we carry it, you yours, and I mine, and those youngest among us who cannot yet even speak beyond expressive wail and cry, and their young mothers and fathers, faces I can picture, you yours, and I mine, they, we, I, confused and sure, surprised, live long enough, live a long time. They, we, you, I, carry it, the end, to which I say, come hither, O my love. Again. Sunshine so warms this deep chair that to sit down here is to sink into summer. Hope wears a sweater with deep pockets. Despair plays a distant flute in the dark. Come hither, O my love, that we may in each other's company converse and share the hours. Let the sea listen and gulls on one leg nod. We have more to say than time. Come hither, O my love. All right, one more. And for this one, I want to ask your participation. It's slightly unusual. It might look like I've got a whole bunch of poems up here. These are all drafts of the same friggin' poem. This is what happens when you're trying to work in a hurry because you have a deadline and you kind of have an idea and you want to see if it works. So what I want to ask you to do is say one word, and it's the last word of the poem. And the word is fly. So when we get to the end of the poem and I go like this, fly, I want you to all say it with me. Okay? So can we practice this once? I'm just going to do it. Fly. Perfect. The country of childhood mostly exiles us all. Did you get that? The country of childhood mostly exiles us all. My father's rage understood, his punishments failed. And one February morning, no school, my mother sleeved me into my coat, hat in my hand, then out. It's sunny, go play. The deadbolt, a slide, and a click. I sat on the porch step. No birds. Had to pee, but I knew a place. Steam rose. That day was cold. I wandered, decided to run as far as breath would carry my legs. Switch got heavier. Uphill, coat open, hat in a pocket, past the Mitchells, Sandermans, Citrons, Sprangs, driveways, bare trees, no wind, no one. Of returning, I have no memory. I know 3 boys and 1 girl. They crawl, pull themselves up, walk. They like the ocean, but not to touch, not too close. It's big. Those waves endlessly layering, unstable, loud, and tall. We stand on damp sand. They hold my leg. Soon they will run to their parents and report, gulls in the sky, a white boat. Anything else? A dog. Small birds all at once. What did the birds do all at once? Fly. Thank you. So I think I'm supposed to ask if there are questions or comments or... Yeah.
Could you read the first line of that last poem again?
The first line of that last poem again. My father's rage understood is the first line. The sentence finishes up. My father's rage understood, his punishments failed.
Oh, maybe it's the title I'm thinking of.
The country of childhood mostly exiles us all. You're not going to find that anywhere but right here. Tom.
Well, you talked about in the intro several writers you studied with.
Yeah.
Who would you say influenced you in your writing?
Oh, that's a long list, Tom, and it includes some people in this room. There are a lot of good writers in this room, and I like to read. And I think of influence as who you keeping company with people, you know. But Dick Hugo and Madeline DeFries were central because they were the first committed adults that I really knew that were doing what I wanted to do. I knew other people my age. I didn't know people in their 40s or 50s or 60s who were doing what I wanted to do. And to see their simple example of having made a life doing it was quite surprising in some ways, but also deeply affirming. It made me understand that things were possible. Other than that, I think I'd seen William Stafford Reed, and knew him, you know, in the way that you can after you've seen him read several times. But I didn't get to know him in any personal way, really. And before that, it was Robert Frost reading at Jack Kennedy's inaugural, and I was pretty young, you know, and he was really old. So, I mean, being born and raised in Oregon, and I mean, William Stafford was the lone exception for me. Everybody else was dead or in a book or both, as far as I was concerned. So it was a big deal. Yeah. But I don't think influence ever stops. I'm still being influenced by all the stuff I read, and anyway, yeah.
Do you remember your first library book?
No. No, but I'll tell you a true story, which I don't mean as bragging, but I went to St. Thomas More Catholic School, which is up on the hill, and they had a library that was maybe twice the size of this room. And at some point, I don't remember, second grade, third grade, something like that, you were allowed to go twice a week and take out 3 books. And I realized after the first week or so that I was spending an awful lot of time trying to figure out which books to take out. And so what I decided to do was to take out the first 3 books on the bottom shelf nearest the door. And then the next day that I was able to do this, I would take out the next 3. And then the next day I would take out the next 3. And eventually you could take out, as you got older, you could take out 4, or you could even take out 5. And that went on the way it went on. And I graduated from 8th grade, and my mother decided, since I was in high school and my younger brother was still in grade school, that she would volunteer at the library. And she came back one day and she said, "You've got your name on an awful lot of those library cards." And I said, "Yeah, it should be on all of them." And she looked at me weirdly, and this was the very first time I realized that this was bizarre, because I didn't think it was bizarre. I just thought it was efficient. I'd taken out every book in the library, and I'd started every one, and I hadn't finished every one, but I'd started every one. So I told her the only books that are going to not have my name on the card are the ones that are brand new to the library, and that's when she goes, "You know, what kind of child have I raised?" I'm sure that's what was going through her head, you know. So, yeah. Do you remember your first library book?
Treasure Island.
Treasure Island. I remember that being an assigned book.
I was 7 when I first.
7. Good for you. Other comments or questions? Yes. Hi,
I
Karen.
know some of your poems are autobiographical.
Yes.
Your own experience.
Yes.
How do you decide which ones will be from your experience and I was wondering about the child in the stroller. I'm assuming
Right.
it wasn't your experience.
No, that's the title for that was In Praise of George Reader, I think. And that's that came from a news article that I read in The Guardian one day. And George Reader was, and is, I think, the harbor master at this little tiny harbor somewhere in England. And he did exactly what the poem says. And like lots of people into those situations, somebody sent out a film crew and filmed him, and he looked really embarrassed and totally uncomfortable and sort of mumbled, "Well, anybody'd do it, wouldn't they?" You know. And I thought, there's more to this than that. So, yeah. So, but I mean, your broader question, I'll say anything to write a good poem. So, because there's what happens in your life, and it stays sort of forever over here. And there's the language you can bring to it, and you can bring them a little closer. But pretty soon, they're never going to match. And the only thing that readers are going to have is the language on the page. So I make that as good as I can. This has done its job. This is what matters. Yeah.
Lex, what made you think of asking us to say fly at the end of your last?
God knows. I just thought it would be a cool thing to do.
Have you done it before?
No.
Well, do it again.
No, I just thought, you've been sitting there a long time, and you should feel like you have some hand in this, it seemed to me. Besides that, there's a little kid's one-word answer to things that is sort of gleeful, and I didn't know how to make it, but I figured we might all have an approximation.
Most delightful.
Yeah, thanks.
We're all gonna do it now.
Absolutely, sure, you might as well.
We'll give you credit.
Yeah. Well, and I can't think of another poem I've written where it would work. It's got to be a one-word sentence. Yeah. Are we good?